Urban legends are strange things, aren't they? Some are almost believable, some are downright crazy, but all are stories that impact the people who grow up with them, hear them, or believe in them. Some tales are larger, expanding to nationwide recognition. Others are smaller and might only be spread in a small county or town. It is often from those out-of-the-way areas that these strangest stories emerge. My name is Luke, and I lived in one of those out-of-the-way areas, a small town in North Carolina. You probably haven't heard of it, and that's for the best. There are a lot of strange stories that surround the wilder and more rural corners of my state. I'm sure every county has its own unique tale, and mine is no different. You see, where I live, it was once the location of somewhere very important to the locals. The history of this place has expanded over the years and led to one of the most pervasive and bizarre stories of all, the story of the Old Fair. The origin of the Old Fair was before my time, though its history persists to this day. The fair itself and the public reality is no secret. Records about exact locations were shoddy, but they exist. Many decades ago, before the state fairs set up in Raleigh, the smaller counties had something else. Close to the county line, by the barrens near my hometown, an overgrown field hides the place that used to be home to the Old Fair. For years, it delighted the townsfolk, until an incident forced them to shut down and eventually be replaced. A traveling fair does not sound awfully terrible, but the more disturbing implications of the story were what changed the tale into the morbid urban legend that it would eventually become. Many of those stories about the Old Fair used to sound hyperbolic or insane, true urban legend guff to scare kids who grew up around the region. I was one of those kids, and I remember the stories. Yeah, they were creepy, and yes, they scared me when I was younger. I wish that was all it was. I had never believed just how much of the fantastical elements of those stories might be true. That is until one day, years ago, when I caught a glimpse of the horrifying reality of the stories. And after that glimpse, my life was never the same. I was 14 years old when it happened. It was summer vacation, and my friends and I were bored on a Wednesday afternoon. We had been riding our bikes around earlier that day, but wanted to go into the woods and explore a bit beyond the town line and into the backwoods beyond. My friend Joey broke the bored silence and suggested something. "Hey guys, maybe we should try and find the Old Fair. It's supposed to be out there somewhere past the old mill and into the overgrown section of the backwoods." The rest of us perked up at the mention of the Old Fair. Kyle was the first to respond. "Yeah, maybe if we want to get lost in the woods like those other kids. Or even better, we find the place and come back with tetanus. I heard that it's basically an old junkyard of rusted scrap that hobos squat at to do drugs." He crossed his arms and shrugged, unimpressed with the idea. And we knew what Kyle's vote was, but my other friends and I considered the suggestion. I was intrigued at the mention of the Old Fair. I remembered the stories that I had heard about it when I was younger, but the darker parts of the story made me hesitant. I was about to say something when Zoe spoke up. "You guys are crazy. I'm not going out there. Not this time of year. Last year, that Billy kid went looking for it on a dare and he never came back. They say that he got popped." She leapt up and held her arms out and shouted, managing to startle Joey and Kyle. She laughed at their surprise, and they tried to play it off while the rest of us chuckled. "That is BS, though." Nikki spoke up for the first time. "That family just moved, and no one was grabbed by the popcorn man." Everyone joined in a round of nervous laughter, but we all recognized that name. When I heard it, I was reminded of the darker part of the fair story. The wreck of the Old Fair is real. It was out there somewhere. But the story about the popcorn man who haunted the place was where the story became more disturbing. They said that in summertime, around the anniversary of when the big fire happened, the old fair comes alive. At night, the shades of the old visitors return, and all around the old fairgrounds, sounds can be heard from the past. Voices whisper and carry on the conversations of the dead. And amidst the haunted ruin of the past, one figure is there, hunting and moving through the spirits, looking for new victims who get caught in the old fairgrounds. This lone figure wears clothes more appropriate for the early 1900s and wheels around an old-timey popcorn cart. He stays there day and night, and anyone trespassing on the fairgrounds when he's there is never heard from again. Soon folks took to calling this person the Popcorn Man. The more disturbing versions of the story even hinted that this Popcorn Man would come into town and snatch kids out of their homes. They said he would drain their blood and use it like a morbid butter to flavor the popcorn that he was eternally making. Even wilder stories spoke of him cutting out eyeballs and putting those in with the corn kernels and popping them too. It seemed like everyone had an elaborate version of the story about the Popcorn Man. I had heard most of them, and I figured it was a silly supernatural bend that we put on the old fair to make it sound spookier. The real story about the man it was based on was no laughing matter. The kernel of truth, no pun intended, to this story was that he was based on a real person. They say that he's the ghost of Carl Stamp. That man was very real, and he had allegedly started the fire that had burned down the old fair. The disturbing reason for the arson was related to his other crimes. They say that he would kidnap children and take them away when the fair left for the season. He would lure them away from their parents with offers of free popcorn and prizes, and then he would abduct and eventually kill them. Apparently, the police had found the remains of his tent and the belongings of kids who had been reported missing throughout the years that the fair operated. Before anything could be done about him, though, the Popcorn Man had learned of the discovery, and rather than risk imprisonment, he set himself and the whole fairground alight. The other staff mentioned the demented screams of the man as they fled. They heard him as he burned, his screams ringing out side by side with the familiar sound of his popcorn popping as the heat continued to cook his namesake. The morbid story and bad press from it was one of the many reasons the fair was shut down for good. The county left the burned remains to molder and never bothered to clear it up. Apparently, some contractors had tried to clear out and reuse the space, but after the fire, no one could find the ruins. It sounds crazy, a popular area that hundreds of people flock to every year, just going missing. But after the fire, the way back to the fairground was just lost, despite being so close to town. Whatever the truth was, the site of Old Fair remained somewhere out there, home only to burnt ruins and ghosts of the past. As the years passed, even the suspected path leading to the old fair was reclaimed by the forest, as if nature itself wanted to resign the history of the place to oblivion. I remembered hearing people talk about the location of the old fair. The rumor in my town was that the entrance was just past Briar's Mill, deep into a tangle of overgrowth. I shuddered when I considered how close it was to my house. My mind kept wandering. I couldn't stop thinking about the mystery of the old fair as my friends talked. And then Nikki touched my arm and I fell out of my daydream. "Luke, are you all right?" she asked with a playful grin. My heart fluttered and I felt embarrassed for zoning out. I saw her hand still on my arm and I froze. I had always had a crush on Nikki, and half the reason that I was out there with everyone was to spend time with her. I managed to spit out a response. "Oh, me, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Sorry, I was just thinking." She looked thoughtfully at me as if making sure that I was really okay. She looked beautiful just then, and I felt even more embarrassed and scatterbrained. Oh, come on, what do you think? Do you believe in the popcorn man? She giggled as she asked me, gracefully ignoring my earlier embarrassment. I don't know, it sounds kind of crazy, but I will say I don't like the idea of getting lost out there. Plus, if we really find something, it could be dangerous. So, the case against getting tetanus is compelling too. Maybe we should just head home and play some video games. Kyle and Nikki looked like they might consider the option, but Joey spoke up. Oh, come on, man, where's your sense of adventure? They say that some of the paranoid old carnies buried some of their money out there since they didn't use banks. So who knows, we might find some treasure if we check it out. The smile widened on his face as he tried to convince us of the adventure that we would be missing out on if we didn't go. Kyle rolled his eyes and Nikki was seconds away from her face being in her palm. Then Zoe held her hand up. Maybe we should go. Jeff and his friends said they found it, and that they even brought back a token from the fair back in spring. It was some old piece of metal in the shape of a coin, and I think that it was BS, but they still got a lot of credit for it. So if we could find the actual ruin and bring something back, we could rub it in their faces. A Cheshire grin spread on her face after finishing. We all knew and sort of hated Jeff. Jeff was Zoe's cousin and he always picked on her. I mean, if we could find something better than them, that would be awesome. It might shut him up next time he brags to me about what fun stuff he and his family get to do for summer that mine can't afford. He would never let it go if we managed to find something better than his stupid, probably fake coin from the old fair. Excited murmurs were all around and I realized the consensus was swinging towards going. I was concerned, of course, but the idea did sound a little exciting at the same time. I finally relented and agreed to go when it seemed like Nikki had changed her mind and was on board. It was the worst decision I ever made. We set out in the afternoon. Zoe ran into Jeff on the way home to get some supplies. She tried to ask him where the old fair was and more importantly how far away. But he just laughed at her and told her that her and her baby friends would never make it and to just give up. Needless to say, this enraged her, and even though she had not gotten the information, she led the charge to try and find the fair wherever it was. We all followed and had set out into the old backwoods just after noon. There was not really a good trail out that far, and we had opted not to bring our bikes since the area would have been terrible for them. After a half an hour of walking, I was beginning to regret my decision to go along. I had no idea how far away the old fair really was, and the longer we walked, the more concerned I became that we were going to get lost. As if reading my mind, Kyle spoke up, tapping Zoe on the shoulder as she led us forward at an enthusiastic pace. Hey Zoe, you sure this is the right way? I swear I saw the mill earlier and I thought the fairground was east of it, not west. She turned back and glowered at him. We are going east. This is the right way, I know it. We don't know exactly how far past the mill it was supposed to be. Just relax. If we can't find it in another half an hour, we can turn around. The rest of us followed, and I saw the anxiety of getting lost was not unique to me. The spirits were down after another half hour passed, and we were still stuck in what felt like the middle of the woods. No ruined fairground in sight, no trail back home, no sight of the mill now. It seemed like we were lost after all. Nikki called for a break and Zoe finally stopped marching. Come on guys, let's have a snack and maybe consider turning around now. The excitement over the adventure had died for most of the group. Zoe and perhaps Joey seemed to be the only ones who wanted to keep searching. No one protested the break, and fortunately Nikki and Zoe had the idea to bring backpacks with some provisions. We sat in a small semicircle and we ate our crackers in multigrain bars. Eventually Kyle said what the rest of us were thinking. How are we going to get back if we turn around now? I mean, I tried keeping track, but I don't know now. It all looks the same. We should have left a trail or something. I agreed, and many of us nodded our heads. Even Zoe did not look too sure anymore. After a minute or so of arguing, she relented, and we all finally agreed to head back. We walked for another half an hour, and soon nervous whispers were heard by the others about how, "Oh, we should have passed the mill by now. I don't think this is the right way back." More time passed, and an underlying panic was simmering. Before another fight broke out and accusations were made for how and why we had gotten lost, something unexpected happened. Joey tripped and fell. He recovered before landing on his face, but we were surprised at the object that he had tripped on. It was a sign. The sign indicated in faded writing that we had arrived at the Bladen County Fair. Disbelief gave way to amusement when we considered the circumstance. We could only laugh at how we had literally stumbled on our destination while trying to get back. I couldn't believe that we had actually found it, and we all looked on in amazement. We shared a few congratulatory high fives and some cheers over our success. The good humor began to dissipate when we looked at the shrouded path leading to the clearing where the old fair waited for us. We realized that since we were there, we would actually have to explore the shadow-haunted site. The tension was broken when Joey smugly said, "You're welcome," while grinning ear to ear. He stood up, wiping off his pants, and he laughed. Zoe's eyes lit up, and Nikki and Kyle looked on in amazement as we pressed on and saw the overgrown clearing give way to a field with the burnt ruin of dozens of small buildings and tents, even the wreck of small rides and other attractions. I rubbed my eyes and blinked in disbelief again while looking around. It was real, it was all real, and it was right here. We had done it. We had found the old fair. We moved into the fairgrounds proper after a short walk through the brush. It was strange how the path to get there had almost vanished into the forest over the years, but the fairgrounds themselves seemed to be clear. It almost seemed like somebody was still keeping the grounds clear. I swear even the grass seemed to be mowed down to a respectable level, like someone somewhere was still cutting it. The place was quiet, of course. At first, the silence hadn't bothered me, but I noticed that I couldn't hear any other birds or animals or anything. Just an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of the group's footsteps as we continued on. "Hey, check this out," I heard Zoe call out from further up ahead. I realized in the daze of beholding this place, the others had moved ahead, and I rushed over to see what she had found. "Look, it's a ticket booth, or what's left of one," she said while pointing at something. She was right. It was the charred ruin of a small booth that bore the smudged remnants of the word admissions. "Oh my God, look!" Joey shouted out, and we rushed to see what he had found. Charcoal. He wore a stupid grin and was holding the blackened bits of something. We sighed collectively, and he shrugged. "What? Come on. I knew we could get rich here. Think about it. We can become coal barons and make tons of money. We just need to lobby politicians into ignoring clean energy so our business keeps a monopoly. We'll be rich." He continued with the bit until nearly all of our eyes rolled in unison, and we went off in search of something actually valuable. We reached a point where the concourse split in different directions. I knew that we would need to follow different paths to explore the whole place in time, but I got a strange feeling about separating, and I spoke up, trying to get everyone's attention. "Hey guys, I don't know if we should stay too much longer. It's starting to get late and we're going to be losing light. We should search quick and meet back by the entrance in 30 minutes, okay?" Everybody looked around and saw the darkening sky. We all knew that we had already been gone a long time. They all agreed, and we moved out in different directions, each one of us in search of something to bring back, some piece of evidence to prove that we had found the place. I didn't think that there was much to salvage, but if we found a souvenir, we could at least throw it in the face of the others and prove that we had really found the old fair. I knew we would cover more ground and potentially find something if we each took a section of the fair, but I was regretting the choice to split up. It was getting darker and the old stories about what happened there were starting to surface and pick at the back of my mind. I tried to remind myself that it was just an urban legend, and that even though this place was real, the popcorn man was long dead. As I pressed on down the path that I had chosen, I thought that I heard a strange noise nearby. I wondered if it might just be an animal or maybe the sound carrying from one of my friends searching. I tried to brush it off, but the disturbing deadness of the old fairground was starting to get to me. I saw a ruined building that might still have something inside. It looked promising, but when I moved closer, I saw the interior had collapsed and I could not go inside, at least not safely. I kept moving and the whole place stretched on in a way that felt surreal. It seemed like it kept going and was larger than it had even looked when we had arrived. I was surprised that I hadn't run into one of my friends at that point, and I looked at my watch and saw that it was getting close to the 30-minute time limit that I had suggested for us. I quickened my pace and finally came across an attraction that looked like it was intact enough to go in. The place was still gutted by fire and a lot of the interior was burned, but it looked like it used to be the funhouse. I saw remnants of colorful pictures on the wall and burnt toys and games. There was even what appeared to be a narrow corridor of shattered glass which may have once been a hall of mirrors. I decided to look near the front and see if maybe they had a cash box, or something left behind from when it was in business. More tangible treasure, as Joey had said. I was running out of time to look, so I resolved to grab a burnt toy as a souvenir, if I couldn't find something better. There was one that carried a miniature flag that if you squinted at it, you could see the fair's logo on it. It would be perfect to prove that we had been there. After looking for a while, I saw that I only had 2 minutes left before I was supposed to meet up with the others. I hadn't found any hidden vaults, so I just grabbed the partly burnt teddy bear with the flag and I went to leave. As I was leaving though, I heard an ear-splitting explosion coming from outside and suddenly I felt a wave of vertigo wash over me. The room felt hot, like very hot for a moment, but then it cooled down suddenly. I felt nauseous and the room seemed to spin. My ears started ringing and I swear that I smelled acrid smoke. I dropped the toy and doubled over. After a few minutes, I finally rallied and was shocked at what I saw when I was able to focus again. I couldn't believe my eyes, but the building had been restored. The funhouse was intact, all the toys looked pristine, and the ruined hallway of glass shards cast the bizarre reflections of an intact hall of mirrors. I thought I might be hallucinating for a moment as I looked at the oddly pristine condition of everything. I thought that I may have passed out and I was dreaming, but it felt too real to be a dream. Suddenly, I heard a scream from outside and I rushed for the exit. I was almost outside when somebody pulled my arm back. I was expecting to see one of my friends, but the face of a little girl was staring back at me. A young girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old was holding my arm and had a terrified look in her eyes. In her other arm, she held the same little teddy bear that I had just dropped, but it looked brand new. I was in shock and speechless at first and simply stared back at her. And then I realized if she was out there alone, she needed my help. I finally mustered the courage to speak. "Little girl, are you okay? How did you get out here all by yourself?" She did not answer, she only looked pleadingly at me and tugged my arm back into the funhouse. She pointed out the door and then looked at me and shook her head. I realized something out there was likely the cause of her fear. I tried to calm her down and I knelt down beside her. My heart nearly stopped when I looked at her again, and her head was on fire. I fell back and screamed, the flames consuming her more by the second as she stared at me, and then she finally spoke. The sound was hushed and the words spoke through burnt and blackened lips. "He is here. Hide." And then she was gone. vanished in a cloud of smoke that came from outside or perhaps came from the fires that engulfed her head moments before. My heart was racing and I could barely breathe. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew that I had to find the others and get the hell out of there. I looked near the area that she had vanished and I saw that the toy was gone. I had nothing to bring back, but at that point I did not care. I ran for the exit, but I remembered the warning and carefully looked outside first. I did not see anyone, but what I did see was unbelievable. The fairgrounds had changed. Everything was intact. It looked like it must have back before it had burned down. There were strange echoes on the wind that carried the faint sound of people talking, laughing, and playing. I couldn't believe it, but I also smelled food. Whatever was happening here was either real or tricking every sense in my body into believing that it was. I closed my eyes and heard the sounds and smelled the scents even stronger. I heard cheers and shouting. I smelled hot dogs, sweet treats, and popcorn. And then I realized that smell in particular was getting stronger. My breath caught in my throat and my eyes snapped open again when I heard the distinct sound of popping popcorn. I realized in horror that if this was all real, then the popcorn man was as well, and he was close. I had to move fast. I could not see as far around the fairgrounds since the fallen debris of the burnt ruins had been replaced by the intact tents and buildings by the impossible resurrection. The popping sound was getting closer and I smelled what could only be described as the stench of burnt popcorn and something more metallic. It was horrible and I considered fleeing back to the funhouse to escape the approaching nightmare. I heard another scream in the distance, and when I turned to face the direction that the sound had come from, the terrible ambience changed slightly. I heard the winding of a crank and the familiar jingle began to play. The telltale notes of Pop Goes the Weasel. They were winding up on a jack in the box back in the funhouse, and the sound and suspense of the song was terrible, against the backdrop of the reanimated nightmare that was the fair. I tensed up as the song neared its end and a soft, disturbing voice whispered behind me as the song had finished. Pop goes the children. I spun around to confront the voice, but nobody was there. I started to think that I was losing my mind. I closed my eyes again and tried to focus, and when I opened them, everything had changed. I looked around and it was darker. The smells were gone and I realized that it was dark because all the lights had gone out. The dim light of twilight was just bright enough to see that the fair was a burnt-out ruin once again. The false life that it had showed was gone, and it looked just as it had when we had arrived, though more twisted by the shadows of encroaching darkness. I had to get out of there. Something was messing with my head. For all I knew, there were gases mixed in with the smoke that I had breathed in earlier. It had to be something like that. It couldn't be real. I sprinted for the exit. My friends were hopefully waiting for me. I was late meeting up with the others, but as I got closer, I saw Nikki and Zoe. Kyle and Joey were nowhere to be seen. "Where is everyone? We have to go now," I managed to spit out, while huffing and puffing from sprinting to them. "Jesus, what happened to you?" Zoe said with genuine concern as she saw how distressed I looked. "I saw something," I blurted out. "Something happened at the ruin where the funhouse used to be. Something is in this place with us and we need to leave." "What was it?" Nikki asked, placing an arm on my shoulder and trying to help me calm down. I don't know, it was a person, a little girl. She was here and then she vanished and the fair looked like it was new again. There was smoke and things smelled like popcorn and then it changed back. Something messed up is happening here and we need to get the others and leave. I tried to urge them. All right, we're just waiting for Kyle and Joey to come back. Wow, you look actually rattled. I felt embarrassed for how they were trying to comfort me after the scare, but what I had seen felt too real to be ignored. We needed to leave anyway. It was almost nighttime and I didn't want to be there at full dark. Zoe started calling out to the other guys to come back and Nikki and I stayed close to the exit. We heard what sounded like a response from somewhere, and then a soft change in the ambience of the place. A rattling and scraping sound, like flimsy wheels being dragged across a rough surface. And then we saw someone. As the figure came closer, we saw that they were wearing a burned and tattered concession apron and hat. They limped along while dragging a large bag with one hand and pushing a ramshackle cart with the other. The sign on the cart was difficult to make out at the distance, but when it got closer, we saw that it was a faded old popcorn cart. We froze in place and watched the figure move closer. It couldn't be real. He couldn't be real. He stopped for a moment, reached down into the bag that he was dragging and pulled out a long metal bar and then regarded us. "Oh look, visitors. Welcome, welcome. Come try some popcorn. The special seasoning is blood." He lunged at us and we screamed in unison and started to run. As we moved away, the sound behind us caused us to stop and turn back around. It was laughter. As we moved back, we saw Joey doubled over and slapping his sides, heaving with laughter. And Kyle emerged from these shadows laughing as well. Oh man, you guys should have seen the look on your faces. I mean, wow, chef's kiss. Freaking popcorn, man, can't believe you fell for that. But look at this card I found. Now here's a souvenir. Zoe walked up to him, all the while he smiled smugly at her. She punched him hard in the shoulder and he yelped in pain and fell back. Hey, I get it. I thought it was funny. I didn't think you guys would be so jumpy for real. Sorry, geez, you should be a boxer. He tried to shake off his shoulder and was still grinning as we moved closer to inspect the bizarre prize that he had found. Do you think this thing belonged to, the real popcorn man? Possibly, even though the urban legends talk about his ghost and all that nonsense. The man was real and he did some pretty messed up stuff. That cart may have been pushed by a legit serial killer in the past, Nikki said with a dead serious inflection. And Joey kept chuckling, like the morbid history only made it funnier, and I sat in silence watching it all play out. Nikki asked the question that we had all been wondering after we saw the cart. Did you look inside? Maybe he left something in there. Joey shook his head, oblivious, and then his eyes bulged, like the thought had just occurred to him. No time like the present, he said while reaching for the lid to the cart. He gave it a hard pull and nothing happened. He tried again and the cart rocketed back and forth but no luck. Why don't everybody offer to help at once? He mumbled in frustration and I stepped forward along with Kyle. The three of us grabbed the lid and pulled as hard as we could. The lid snapped open and I fell down along with Kyle, while Joey managed to stay on his feet. Zoe and Nikki stepped forward, anxiously waiting to see what was inside. Well? Zoe asked, expectantly looking at Joey. For the first time, the stupid grin had vanished from his face. He just looked down into the contents of the cart with no reaction. I had managed to pick myself up and I looked up just in time for Zoe to stand next to the cart and look inside. She gave a blood-curdling scream and I rushed over to see what it was. Inside the cart, where the popcorn would normally be stored, was a nauseating sight. The stale popcorn had been stained red by fresh blood and there were shards of bone strewn into the horrific mixture. At the center was the crowning horror, a person's severed head. It was partly flensed of skin, but there was no mistaking the awful sight. The others soon gathered around. Nikki gasped and Kyle retched. Zoe stopped screaming and held her hand over her mouth. I took an involuntary step back and Joey just stood there and stared at the macabre nightmare. "We need to call the cops or do something, but first we need to get the hell out of here. That thing in there, there's still skin on it. It looks like this happened recently. We have to go now." Nikki shouted at us, fear welling in her voice. "Yeah, you're right. We need to leave." I managed to respond, fear making my own voice tremble. In unison, we all turned and started for the exit, the same way that we had got in. All of us except for Joey. He just stood there and stared at the cart and what was inside. "Joey, come on! What the hell?" Zoe shouted back at him. We all slackened our pace when we noticed that he hadn't moved. He finally looked up when we were shouting at him. His smile had returned, but it did not look like his normal sarcastic grin. It looked wrong. "We can't go. Not yet, not without something important." He stammered out as if he was about to have a panic attack. His eyes rolled into the back of his head and Zoe shouted at him again. What do we need? Do we need to spend the night in a burned down fairground with a killer on the loose? Come on, let's go." She noticed his eyes and how he seemed checked out. She grabbed his shoulders and shook him. Suddenly, he lurched forward, and she took a step back as he stared at her intensely. We can't leave without getting any of the fair's famous popcorn." He grinned at us all, but there was no humor in it. His eyes had a glassy, surreal tint to them. "All right, joke's over. Come on, you idiot. This is a reel." She was cut off and only managed a strangled gasp of air as in a flash. Joey had taken the sharpened piece of metal from earlier and stabbed it into her neck. Nikki was the first one to scream this time. Kyle was already running and I could barely make my body move after what I had just witnessed. I couldn't believe it. He had killed her. My flight response finally kicked in and I staggered after them. I heard a voice call out after us. "Oh, come on, where are you going? A bit of salt and some of this one's a special sauce and we can share the perfect snack. Don't leave just yet." He laughed, a hollow and terrible thing that sounded nothing like Joey. I ran on in a blind panic, past the gate and into the woods beyond. It was so dark I got separated from the others, and I could only hear the distant, panicked sound of feet stomping over dry leaves and sticks with abandon. I heard the sound all around, in front of me, beside me, and worse, behind me. I kept running into the brush, branches and vegetation striking my face and tearing at my arms, but I couldn't stop. I had to find my way back. I thought that I heard a distant scream that sounded like Nikki. I prayed that she was all right. Stumbling over a rock, I was pitched onto my face. The impact knocked the wind out of me and I was panting and trying to catch my breath. I attempted to slow my breathing and focus on the sounds around me. I could barely see an inch in front of my nose, and I did not know if I should be more worried or less that these sounds of footsteps had vanished once I had stopped. I considered that I might be safe for the moment. My mind was racing to try to find some explanation as to what the hell we had just witnessed. Something was there, something in that cart. It got a hold of Joey and it twisted him. If I hadn't seen that little girl and heard her warning, I would have thought that she had just snapped. But I realized it might not be so simple. It was quiet all around me and I had no idea where I was. So I resolved to walk in any direction that was not the way that I had come from. Staggering through the dark forest for an unknown amount of time, I knew that I was lost. I had no means of finding the trail back in the darkness, It felt like I had gone miles, and I knew that I must have spent at least an hour in my exhausted wandering. But then I saw a light, and I was hopeful that I had reached the edge of the forest. I thought it might be the mill in the distance. I figured if anybody was there later, if they at least had a guard on duty, then somebody could help. But as I got closer to the light, my heart sank. I had found my way out of the dark trail, right back to where I had started. I felt overwhelmed and hopeless as I looked around and saw that I had arrived back at the main entrance to the fair. The place was lit up now, just like it had been in the vision that I had. Bright torches and old electric bulbs lit up the avenue of intact tents and buildings. The terrible echoes of the people who had died there were heard in the wind once again. And worst of all, in the distance, I heard the ever-present sound of popping popcorn. I thought I was going to die. I thought that my friends might have already been killed by the popcorn man. Suddenly, I heard gasping behind me, and to my relief, I saw Nikki emerge from the trees. I saw the same look on her face when she saw where she was, realizing that the nightmare was not over. She saw the fairgrounds and fell to her knees and started crying. I rushed over to her, and she stood up and took a reflexive step back. "Are you really you?" she whispered with fear in her eyes. I nodded my head and just whispered back, "Yes," not really having a way of proving that I was, but hoping she would believe me. She rushed forward and hugged me. I could barely breathe as she squeezed me so hard, but it was comforting nonetheless that someone else was there with me. Now we just had to find a way to get out before the popcorn man found us. Nikki and I argued quietly about whether to try and leave through the dark forest again or try something else. I didn't know how, but it seemed like we were being kept there by some force. It couldn't be a coincidence that we fled into the woods only to arrive back at the same time, despite running in the opposite direction. I tried to convince her to go with me into the fair and try to find a hiding spot or something, at least until the morning. I knew that it was a bad idea, but I also knew that we couldn't escape back the way that we had come. Not yet, at least. Nikki was not easily convinced. "No, we can't stay here. Joey's lost it. He thinks he's the popcorn man. He's going to kill us, just like he did with Zoe," she said, trying to keep her voice down as she looked around in panic. "Hey, I know it's not safe here either, but maybe we can find some place to hide. Somewhere with doors or a weapon. Hey, it's better here where we can at least see the danger. Out there, we'll get lost and picked off one by one. For all we know, Kyle's already dead," I said as somberly, and Nikki considered the morbid idea and shuddered. "I just want to go home. Our parents are probably already looking for us. I mean, they have to be, right? They might be searching the woods right now," she said with a pleading tone, like if she believed it strongly enough it would be true. I hoped she was right. We were all AWOL from home, and I hoped she was right and that our parents were looking for us. But what could they find out here if no one could reach the old fair? I wondered if we only found the place because it wanted to be found, because it was daytime and something let us in. Our debate was ended for us by the rustling of leaves and the sight of someone emerging from the tree line. We both must have been expecting Kyle because we each took a step forward in anticipation. When we saw who it really was, Nikki shrieked and I screamed as well, as we ran toward the old fair to flee Joey, covered in blood and still wearing the popcorn man apron. "What's the hurry? We have all night. Oh, come on, you two must be hungry. Have a snack, visit with us for a while." A chilling laugh that sounded like someone else's voice being superimposed over Joey's rang out. We ran madly down the main concourse of the old fair. I stayed right behind Nikki as we fled, and we heard the unhurried footsteps of the popcorn man close behind us. Even as we sprinted away, he managed to stay close, only moving at a brisk walk. I stole one look behind us as we ran, and I regretted doing so. I saw a horrible transformation under the false light of the old fair. As Joey stepped under the glow of the lamps, he seemed to flicker for a moment and was replaced by the form of someone else. Someone who was horribly burned on parts of his body and face. He wore a bright white concession outfit and hat, but worst of all was the terrible rictus grin stretched across the burned tissue of his mouth. He was beaming at us as he followed, his eyes blazing with a hunger that was inhuman. We ran on and saw what looked like a utility building. It was small, but it had an intact door, so we rushed inside and slammed it shut. We looked around frantically for something to help keep the door closed, and I saw a heavy chest of various tools. "Help me with this," I shouted to Nikki, and I started pushing it toward the door. It was heavy and it moved slowly across the floor. We pressed harder in desperation as we heard the sound of that awful voice humming "Pop Goes the Weasel." The chest reached the door just in time to keep it closed as it began to heave with thunderous force. The bashing went on for a minute or so and then it stopped, and it was replaced by a gentle knocking. "Hello, is anyone there? Room service, we just need to clean the place. Are you paying guests, or are you pests? I heard we have a pest problem, and I'm afraid I might have to call management to hire an exterminator. I never liked their methods, but sometimes it's funnier to use poison to get the job done. I just hope it doesn't spoil the flavor of what's left. I'll see your body soon." The voice cackled and we heard a popping sound and then footsteps receding from the door. Nikki inched closer and pressed her ear to the door. The next moment, she fell back and started coughing. I smelled it too, a sickly aroma that hurt to breathe in. We realized that he had hooked up some sort of ventilation system to the room that we were in, and he was flooding the place with caustic fumes. "We have to get out of here, it's some kind of poison," Nikki shouted in between fits of coughing. I looked around desperately to see if there was another way out. The whole place seemed like a giant metal box, and I could not see any way out that was not back through the door that we had just blocked. We kept searching desperately, and I was about to lose hope. And then I saw in the corner of the room a section of paneling that looked bent. There was a glimmer of light emerging from the bent section, and I called Nikki over. We managed to find some tools in the room, and with a few pry bars, we were able to pull the paneling apart just wide enough to escape through. We leapt out of the toxic room and onto the ground outside. The popcorn man was nowhere in sight, and we used the opportunity to carefully slip away to a darker space between buildings. We tried to stifle the lingering coughs that we still had as we moved along as silently as possible. As soon as we were in the clear, Nikki wrapped me in a hug and cried softly into my shoulder, trying to process another near-death experience. I hugged her back, and for a moment we were just grateful to still be together and still be alive. The sounds around us became more oppressive as we crept in the shadows, trying to stay as far away from where we thought our pursuer was. The entire place got hotter, and there was a smoky haze that carried the scent of blood and butter. Nikki was holding her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming or crying, and I was right there with her. I tried to focus on where we could take shelter. I hoped that we were at least getting close to morning. Maybe then whatever power this place had would lessen enough for us to escape. She was afraid to keep moving into the light and out in the open, but I held her hand and tried to reassure her. We saw something that might help. In the distance was what looked like a security booth, sort of an old-timey affair that a private security worker or even a constable might occupy. We rushed over to the building and tried the door. It was open, and we rushed inside and closed it as quickly and quietly as we could. The inside was mostly empty, but a bright red fire axe had been left on a table. It looked new, like it didn't belong with the older stuff that this nightmare version of the fair had conjured. Nikki looked at me nervously and expectantly, and I took the hint and hefted the heavy axe. I was barely able to lift it, but at least we had something to defend ourselves with if all else failed. It must be getting close to morning. Maybe if we hide here we can hold out until then and then we can escape, I told her hopefully. Nikki looked scared and doubtful but nodded her head and agreed. Yeah, okay, we can do that. We waited in there under the heavy desk, listening to the nightmare carnival around us. The sounds got worse and we heard the echoes of people being slaughtered and burned alive. All the while, that demonic laughter of the popcorn man was the backdrop to it all. Suddenly, we heard a sound that we knew was not just the ghosts. It sounded like a person was right outside. Hey guys, help me! Where are you? We need to get out of here. We heard Kyle calling from outside. I leapt up and Nikki held onto my hand, staying under the desk. She shook her head and I immediately understood her reservation. I knew that it was dangerous, but I had to go see. I had to try and save Kyle if it was him. I poked my head out the door and saw the distant glimmer of dawn. I had hoped that we might make it out of here, but then I looked around and saw that the plaza outside was empty. I thought that it might have been a trick, but then I heard Kyle again. Help, please, behind the cart, I'm stuck. He chained me to it. I stepped over cautiously, following Kyle's pleading voice. I rounded a corner and saw the horrible popcorn cart. I took a step back and I gasped, but the popcorn man was not there with it. I heard Kyle calling out again. Help me, please, before he comes back. Come on, Luke, is that you? Nikki, come on, guys. Against my better judgment, I moved closer to the horrible cart and I looked behind it. Kyle was not there. Kyle, where are you? I asked cautiously, a bad feeling welling up in my gut. Oh, I'm here. Have you tried the popcorn? I'm delicious. His voice sounded off and I took a terrified step back as I saw the cart top open up. There was a sequence of loud popping sounds and soon popcorn started flooding out of the cart, followed by a wave of blood, and amidst the popcorn I saw something horrific. It looked like eyeballs and teeth, and soon I saw Kyle's entire face emerge in the carnage. I stumbled back in sheer horror at the impossible sight, and then I heard a scream and turned around, only to find the popcorn man standing by the security building. He had Nikki cornered and I had to find some way to get him away. He started humming Pop Goes the Weasel and I shouted to get his attention just as he was stepping into the building. He paused, slowly turned around to face me and laughed. How did you like the treats your friend left? Pretty good, huh? He giggled and then started moving toward me. I had gotten his attention but was paralyzed with fear as soon as he laid his murderous eyes on me. He moved with unnatural speed and closed in. Just when I thought that he would grab me, I heard a grunt of pain and saw a sliver of light cresting the top of the forest and shining down on the nightmare visage of the popcorn man. He covered his eyes and the gruesome face shifted back to Joey. There was a panicked look in his eyes and he pleaded with me. Can't stop him. Kill me. Do it now before it's too late. Before he comes back, you need to stop him. You need to stop me. My heart hammered in my chest and my mind raced for options. There had to be some other way. I gripped the axe tightly, but I could not move. And then I saw him step back out of the faint ray of sunlight and his features slowly changed back into the hideous visage of the popcorn man. I had no time left. I had to do something. I made my choice and I lifted the axe. I swung with all my might and embedded the head of the axe directly in the chest of the popcorn man. There was a horrible scream that sounded like it came from the pits of hell as the pressure around us was sucked out of the air. I saw the body fall to the ground and I fell back, my hand still shaking from what I had done. I looked at Joey on the ground bleeding. The axe was still lodged in his chest. I knelt down beside him, and as I saw his face returning to normal, I broke down. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how to stop it. I couldn't save you." I rocked back and forth, unable to process the madness of what had just happened. Nikki ran over to me and held on to me. "It's okay, it's going to be okay. We're alive and we stopped the popcorn man. That was not Joey. It got him. It's not your fault." Nothing would fix what I had done, but her words did comfort me. We sat for a while in the bloody nightmare of the fairground, traumatized but alive. We both noticed a change in the air and a weird feeling of pressure being released. We stood up, helping each other as we rose and looked around. To our surprise, the fair was gone, or at least it had returned to the burned ruin that it was when we had first arrived. The initial shock of the change was jarring, but not as much as what we saw, or rather did not see next. The spot where Joey had fallen was empty. The blood was gone, no trace of anything having happened. No blood, no axe, just gone. Neither of us could explain it, but we feared what that meant for anyone who got trapped in this living nightmare. We hoped that all our friends who were lost would not be trapped here forever. We left the old fair immediately, not looking back for a moment at the whispers that still lingered in the air. Our friends were gone, dead maybe, but definitely gone, and we knew that we would likely never see them again, except in our nightmares. In the daylight, the path led us out, and fortunately the trail did not change. We made it back home in less than half an hour. As expected, our parents had been looking for us, and after the initial reunion, we were brought in to answer questions about what had happened to us. The relief at seeing our return was soon replaced by anguish, though, as Zoe, Kyle, and Joey's parents would learn that their children were not coming home. We told everyone about what had happened, and as expected, no one believed us. When we were pressured by our parents and the authorities to tell us what really happened, we told them the only truth we thought they would believe. We told them that we had gotten lost trying to find the old fair. We were stuck outside, and when night came, we were separated, and only Nikki and myself managed to find our way back. Search parties were sent out. The effort lasted for days, and eventually the town had reached the same conclusion that Nikki and I already knew. They would not find anyone out there, though the reason why was more terrible than anyone would believe. I still think we only found our way to the old fair that day because something led us there. The people with lures will find the fair and the horrors within, while everyone else finds nothing but a never-ending forest. In the aftermath, I struggled to adapt to the fear and anxiety of life. I couldn't forget the pain and trauma of that night, and after much convincing and an opportune job prospect my dad found, we left our town and moved to another state. Nikki and I stayed in touch even after I left, and eventually we wound up going to the same university, and our friendship and the bond of shared grief grew into something more. We got married and started a life together. We ended up a few states away in a comfortable home in a less rural area. Lots of space for our own kids to grow up. We didn't tell them the stories of the old fair and the popcorn man. In fact, we did not do urban legends at all in our house, after our experience. We spent years happily living our lives together, and the horror of the past became a distant memory. But yesterday something happened, something that has made us realize that after all these years, the ghosts of the past still linger. Our son Daniel came inside from playing in the backyard, and we saw that he was holding something strange. We asked him what it was, and he said that it was a toy from a friend. He walked up to us, and I looked down at what he was holding. I looked at the small, burnt teddy bear with a blackened little flag in its hand, and my heart froze. I looked closer to confirm what my spiraling mind had already concluded. The flag had the faded image of the old fair stamped on it. I was speechless, and Nikki, despite the fear I saw in her eyes too, asked him, "Who gave this to you?" Our son looked up at us and answered with a smile. "Oh, it was a nice man that said he was my Uncle Joey. He said he works at a fair where you used to live, and that we can all visit soon. Can we go?" I looked at Nikki and she took my hand. I felt her pulse racing, and I tried to collect myself and think of what we should do next. Even after all these years, the old fair was still out there. We thought that we were done with the misery that it brought us, but the old fair was not done with us. The horrible memories came flooding back, and I consider the horrors that await us still. Our friends are still trapped in that nightmare purgatory, where the spirits of the dead rage and their suffering is drowned out by the echoes of a madman popping popcorn. I know we have to go back. Nikki knows it too. We have to save our own children, and we have to find a way to stop the evil of that place and the fiends that reside there once and for all. I don't know how, but we have to try. Because if we can't, we might be joining our old friends sooner than expected.
Nelson Asada, Dice Screaming, Meat Casher, Malcolm Black, Talamagara, Justin Fotenauer, That One Woodsman, Die Can't Play, Dino, Deggy, MP Massacre 91, Leon Knott, SWAT, Kathy McGuire, Jimmy Griffin, Miss Eldridge, Dragon Slayer 048, Takeo Zarilla, Sanjay Anthem, Sleepy Shromi, Mark Norman, Nina Link Kidder, Richard French, yours truly, Omni Rubix, Sonic GMT, Wayward Son, Caleb Windsor, Never Enough, Russell and Flo, Stevie B 7649, Ray Weingartner, Stephen King 04, Shrimpo the Shrimp, Genevieve Sweet, Lone Wolf Sam, Ivory Sage, Lunas TV, I Am Loki 5849, Chicago